Hello and welcome to the ReCook virtual webinar, ReCook Cafe virtual webinar this afternoon, at least this afternoon on the East Coast. I'm Terry Goldberg. I'm the Executive Director of the Northeast Waste Management Officials Association, or NWMOA. This webinar has been jointly organized by NWMOA and the Northeast Recycling Council, or NERC. And we have with us the Executive Director of NERC, Lynn Rubenstein, who's joined us today. And we were also assisted, and really the real organizers of this webinar were a number of colleagues, including Jesse Evan Kearns from the Syracuse University Center for Sustainable Community Solutions.
I was trying again, Jesse.
Okay. Thumbs up. Thanks, Jesse. Anne Bijur from the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation, and Gary Feinland from the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. And
I'm not going to be able to hear you. I'll be on chat.
Okay.
I'll stay on chat unless I get it figured out.
Okay, we've been trying to solve some problems with the computer. So we started the webinar, so we're going to be all muted in a second, and once we start triggering the videos and the slides. Anyway, all of these colleagues have really put in a Herculean effort, and we really greatly appreciate all of the work they've done to pull this off today. We're really excited to have four amazing chefs with us to present today. We will be showing videos, demonstrations of their cooking techniques that minimize food scraps and waste, and their tips for doing that as they prepare some recipes for us and demonstrate them today. This is the first time we've offered a webinar like this and used this kind of format with the videos we're going to be sharing. So bear with us if we have any technical difficulties. We do have a set of handouts to share with all of you, and you should be able to see those in the handouts area of the GoToWebinar panel. So before we get started, I want to cover some logistical tips. We are recording this webinar, and it will be posted as a recording as soon as we can after we finish the webinar today. We will also be posting the handouts today and in the individual links to the individual YouTube webinars that you're going to be seeing. You are currently muted. We will keep everyone muted since this is a rather large group throughout the webinar, and we will make sure to keep the audio interference to a minimum if we can. Please use the chat box on your control panel. It's toward the bottom of your GoToWebinar panel to communicate with those of us who are the webinar organizers about any issues you are having, and we will try to respond as we can. To activate the chat box, click on the box with the diagonal line through it on the right-hand side of the row, and that will open it up so you can type your message. Use the question box also in the control panel. It's in the gray row, also close to the bottom of your control panel, to share questions or thoughts with us and the panelists. Click on the box on the right-hand side of that row to open it up, and so you can type in your question. We will try to have a Q&A session after the presentations are finished, and we will try to get to as many questions as we can. You can also share your thoughts and suggestions in the question box. So I wanted to start with a few points about why we are doing this webinar and care about, I can pull up my slides. There we go. Here we go. Okay, so why are we holding this webinar today? We really have a serious problem with wasting food in the United States. We have studies that have shown that up to 40% of food in the United States is never eaten. What does that mean for the average family of four? It means that they lose an average of about $1,500 every year in food they purchase that ends up being wasted or scrapped or whatever. Much of that food ends up in the trash. And so, we're all dedicated to the notion of minimizing all that food waste and reducing what's going in our trash. As residents, we waste a lot of the food that we buy, whether it's takeout or prepared fresh in our homes. We actually are responsible for more wasted food than all the restaurants, grocery stores, and other food services businesses combined. And so this is some sort of a pie chart of, where food waste is generated by the various parts of the supply chain. When we throw out this food, the most obvious impact is related to disposal. It takes up space in landfills and it produces methane when the food decays without oxygen. Or burning in a waste to energy facility, where very little energy comes from the food since it contains about 70% water. There are other larger impacts associated with wasted food in the growing, transporting, and storing of the food, wasted calories, water, cropland, labor, energy, and increased greenhouse gas emissions. And of course, there is the impact on our budgets. In the US, this wasted food is equal to the total of $218 billion annually. And we think we can do better. Throughout their demonstration, today's chefs will provide tips, techniques, and recipes to help us use more of the food in our homes. So one of the ideas that folks in this group have pioneered is this notion of a ReCook Cafe. And I'm going to ask Jesse now to talk a little bit about what we mean by a ReCook Cafe.
Sure. So the ReCook Cafe idea was just kind of a joke that we as a group threw out at one of our meetings like a year and a half ago. And essentially, it's modeled after the Repair Cafe model. So the vision is to have a room full of people that come together that are curious about this topic, but instead of having stations where there's fixers, each station would feature a chef or someone who is knowledgeable about food preservation. And so depending on what type of cooking skill you're interested in, you could go to those various tables and learn that for yourself. And it all kind of stems from this residential education standpoint. We're always through our communication saying, we want people to plan their meals. We want them to be creative with their leftovers, and we want them to, to be able to use all the different parts of vegetables. And it's good to tell that and to communicate to them, but if they don't have the skills or the knowledge to do that, they're not going to be able to do it. So that's really where this idea is coming from. We want to give people the food literacy and also the confidence in the kitchen to be able to do those different things. And so that's what we're hoping to be able to provide for today. Instead of doing an in-person format for obvious reasons, we're giving our first attempt at this virtually. So I will pass it back to Terry and we can start to kick things off. Looks like you're muted still, Terry.
There we go. So first video will be a presentation by one of our chefs, Peter Ricardo. Peter is the product donation manager at the Central New York Food Bank. He has been involved with several facets of the food industry throughout his 50 years of participation in the labor force. It is a career that has taken him around the US, including work in states like New York, Florida, Colorado, and California. From 1990 to 2001, he was the culinary restaurant manager instructor at Syracuse University. And since 2004, he's been the product donation and supply chain specialist at the Food Bank of New York. And so we're going to have a video by Peter. And then after we see all the videos, we'll have questions and answers at the end. So it's loading. Hopefully it's going to start. Thank you so much, Peter. That was great. We're now going to switch to video by Abigail Henson. Abigail is the founder of the Farm Girl Juicery. She is a slow food chef in Syracuse. She's an educator. She celebrates the agricultural bounty surrounding her hometown, connecting others in her community to its abundance. She's on the brink of launching this new company called Farm Girl Juicery as a stall in the Salt City Market, a social mission-driven company that provides fresh, cold-pressed juice for her community with a global initiative to advocate for clean water wells around the world. So let's get started. Thank you so much, Abigail. Next, we're going to be hearing from another chef, our friend Jim Mccarthy. Jim Mccarthy is the chef and owner of the Mill Market. He has been working in the culinary field for over 20 years. He graduated from the New England Culinary Institute in the early 2000s and went on to pursue his master's degree in nutrition and food science from the University of Vermont while working at a Single Pebble in Burlington, Vermont. Jim then went on to work at Shelburne Farms for about a decade, where he oversaw a kitchen and staff dedicated to farm-raised products and sustainability. He and his wife now own the Mill Market at South Burlington and are dedicated to providing his customers with fresh, local food in a country store setting. Thank you, Jim. I'm going to unmute Jim, or Jim, you can unmute yourself. I know you want to talk a little bit about your worksheet, so go ahead.
Yes, just wanted to go over a few things with everyone before we go on to the next presentation. So just want to go over there's 5 strategies for reducing food waste. They are 1, smart shopping and planning, pretty self-explanatory. Just plan for the week. Always I find underplan what you're going to cook because things come up in the week. So don't plan all 7 days because you'll inevitably get tired one day and want to go out, eat out, and then you'll be have leftovers at the end. And always plan a leftover day. Speaking of, number 2, love your leftovers. Save them. I think some of the other chefs talked about having a little place in your refrigerator where you put all your leftovers, you put all the stuff you need to use. Make sure you use them up and don't just wait till they go bad. Number 3, we have a no recipe batch and scrap-based cooking. Those are some of the recipes that I demonstrated. The scrap-based cooking are the kale stem pestos. I also included another couple other food waste or wasted product recipes in your handouts there. And then no recipe cooking, I touched on that. And then having hero recipes, as I call them, which really can incorporate anything you have in your fridge, whether it's meat, whether it's so that all that stuff you get from the farm share that you don't know what to do with, just throw it in a pot, make a chili, make a stew, whatever you can. Number 4, storing foods properly, knowing where to keep them in the fridge, knowing how long they last, and then also learning to use your freezer well. In fact, here at the market, I have all the staff. After they slice tomatoes for our deli, they save all the ends and all the bits, and we put them in the freezer. And then we have enough. We actually turn it into to marinara sauce. And then number 5 is understanding expiration dates and signs of spoilage. And I find that there's a lot of confusion around expiration dates. And in fact, that there's only one food in the U.S. that's required to have a expiration date by law, and that's baby food. Everything else are just industry standards. They're set by people who manufacture the food, and a lot of them are based off of just ways to make more food sell. So they give themselves a shorter shelf life when in fact that they're fine way past their expiration date. And then using your senses also. Don't just use the expiration date and say, oh, it's past the expiration date and throw it out. Look at it, smell it. Does it smell good? Does it taste all right? Or are those crackers not crisp anymore? Then maybe use them for a soup or thickening. And if you guys are able to pull up your handout, I have actually a food waste workshop. It's Jim McCarthy's food waste worksheet. And it goes through a bunch of different foods, the spoilage issue, and is it safe to use or not? And there's really only one food on that that's not safe to use, and that's the shredded cheese. If you have mold all throughout, really there's nothing you can do. You can't pick it out, and you got to throw it away. If you have pigs, it's great for pigs, or you can always compost it. And then just a couple of the ones I want to point out. You can read through this on your own, but eggs, eggs can be past their expiration date by quite a bit. I think I've used eggs that are 3 months old. I've rarely seen a bad egg. And if it is bad, you'll know right away. So don't use it. Otherwise, they just sort of dry out. The egg pocket or the air pocket gets a little bit big. Some of you may have heard of testing eggs. If they float in water, they're bad. They really aren't. They're still fine for using baking or anything you're going to cook them with. Muffins, cakes, quiches, anything like that. If you are using your freezer, another one is frozen meat with white spots and kind of dried in appearance. This just means they're freezer burned. They sort of get a little dried out. While they might not be culinary the best thing to use in the world, but they're still fine to use in soups and stews and a lot of things like that. Another big one is milk. I've seen milk still be fine a month after its expiration date. And its expiration date is actually a sell-by date, which gives you technically 7 days after the expiration date in the store to use it up. But this is all set, again, industry standards. In the summertime, it might not last as long because the cold chain where it's being exposed to a little bit hotter heats during the cold chain is broken a bit more. Whereas in the winter, it might never see a temperature above 40 degrees for its entire life, from coming out of the cow to being in your refrigerator. So those are just a couple things. If you guys have any questions, we can tackle them in our question and answer session. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much, Jim. So now we're going to switch to our final video. That's going to be by Morgan Lee. Morgan is the culinary educator from the Harvest Wait Food Cooperative in Albany, New York, and she teaches classes focused on product education and sustainability practices. So it's great to have her with us. She's going to demonstrate making a beet pizza. Okay, now we're on to some Q&A, and hopefully the other presenters will start to join us so we can do some Q&A. We've got a lot of questions. I'm going to try to get through some of them. I don't know if we can get to all of them. So one question, if I can get the visuals going here. Stop that. There we go. Okay, so we're back with folks live. So one question from way back in the beginning was, any chance we can break down food waste between edible and non-edible? And that sort of gets back to that original breakdown, sort of scraps like broccoli spears and carrot tops and leftovers, sort of, you know, breaking down what is edible out of sort of the scraps and what is not. Anybody have any data on that? I'm going to unmute all of you if you're muted. So go ahead. Jesse, did you have anything you want, or Gary or Ann, you want to share on that?
Yeah, so I haven't seen any statistics that say, you know, what fraction of the waste stream is made up of edible and inedible. All I can really speak to is kind of that general class, that when you look at the materials that are going to landfill or incineration, can make up 15 or 20%. It's a really large class of materials that's coming out of the household or businesses or institutions and going to those waste management facilities. But yeah, I don't have any specific breakdown between, you know, because I think there's a portion of it's kind of subjective, right? I might say, well, banana peels, what do the 230 plus people on this call think? Are they edible or are they not? Most people I know don't eat banana peels, but I have seen recipes for shredding them and turning them into like a pulled pork type option. So I think there's a little bit of gray area and ambiguity. But one thing's for sure, and there is a huge amount of edible food that is going to waste, hence while we're all here today.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I think, I mean, basically, if it doesn't have dirt on it or isn't too tough, you know, like, you know, Peter was talking about the carrot stems and the celery stems that had a little bit of dirt. You wouldn't want to eat that. But I don't think he even peeled the carrots, which I'm a big fan of. You know, just make sure you scrub them well and get all the dirt off it. But anything is edible as long as you're willing to eat it, technically. So if it tastes good, you eat it. If it doesn't, you know, feed it to animals or put it in the compost.
Okay, I know I'm hungry after watching all the food being cooked. All right, I think this is a question for Peter. Peter, what brand of knife do you use?
Am I on now?
You're on.
I can hear you guys. Oh, finally got the sound figured out. I have never been very particular about knives. I'm more interested in what the steel is. Does it have a decent steel on the blade? You can go to a restaurant supply, get a utility grade knife like the one I had in my demo I've had for years. So it is sort of like if you get a hammer at Ace True Value Hardware, or you get some very high-end S-Wing, it's how you use the tool, really. Do you keep it sharp? Is it the right length? How does it feel in your hand? So I wouldn't get hung up on getting a Wusthof or a Henkel's or spending $200 on a knife. I think you're better off getting something that's just got a decent steel in the blade, something you can sharpen and maintain, and then you're good to go.
Anyone else have any favorite tips on knives? No?
I
Okay.
think the same, just making sure that you're doing your part to manage your knives. A good tip is to, sometimes farmers markets or co-ops will have sharpeners on hand too, and bring it in at least once a year if it's a usually heavily used knife.
Okay. Somebody commented, Megan Byers, that you can throw banana peels in your smoothies too. It's great fiber. Might want to use organics bananas for that though. And speaking of that, somebody did bring the question about whether or not, what you guys think about using the peels from non-organic food, you know, in the kinds of recipes you're talking about. Who wants to comment on that? Anyone?
I'll just throw in, you know, my 2 cents. Of course, I'm in the hunger relief industry, So we don't get real hung up on the politics of how the food is grown. However, there's going to be concentrations because of the botany of the plant. Somebody more versed than I am in botany would be able to really say what those concentrations are. But as far as actual content, I wouldn't really know that. But I think it's also a matter of moderation. I mean, if you're going to have a diet of chemically grown potato skins and you're going to eat them every day for years, you might want to double think that. But I think as long as you're introducing a lot of variety into your diet, that's usually a safe way to go, I think.
Okay.
Yeah,
Anyone else have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way. You know, as long as you're washing everything properly, the skins also, why they may have other concentrations of things, they also have lots of their highest concentration of vitamins and minerals. So, you know, maybe it all evens out. Maybe it's better for you, whichever one. But I tend to want to make my food the most nutrient dense possible. So I tend to put the skins in a lot of things, including my mashed potatoes, keeping the carrots on, you know, that type of thing.
Okay.
And I'm going to throw in that organic doesn't mean edible.
Mm-hmm.
You can have a teaspoon of something organic and lights out. So it's a lot in the definition and in the amount of use. You know, there's a lot of variables there.
Okay. So we have a couple questions about juicers and food processors, and unfortunately, at the last minute, Abigail, whose video we saw, she wasn't able to join us today, and she's certainly the juicing expert among us. But in any case, you know, can anyone elaborate on the difference between juicers and food processors? And, you know, if you don't have a juicer, can you still make juice effectively with a blender? Anyone have any thoughts on that?
I'll throw in real quick. You certainly can, but a juicer actually has a chipper pulverizing blade that totally tears up the product and spits pulp out one end, which you can use as bulk in any number of things, and the juice and the liquid out the other. A blender is going to certainly pulverize what you have, but you're going to have to strain it somehow if you really want to juice. And what I'm sure Jim or I would do is you'd have some cheesecloth and you'd squeeze out the liquid like we do when we're chopping parsley or herbs or something. And you'll get a very, very drinkable, very adequate juice. Or, you know, bulk up, get your fiber, eat that pulp.
Okay, anyone else want to comment on that? Okay.
Peter.
Okay.
I think Peter did a good job of explaining, yeah.
Okay. What can be done with those lemon rinds? Is there a recipe to use them?
Ooh, preserved lemons. You can do, look offhand, I couldn't tell you, but preserving lemons is a great way to, you can eat the entire thing, the skin and everything. They're great in Moroccan cooking and have a long shelf life and taste really tasty too.
Okay, any other
Yeah,
advice?
I've never tried the lemon rinds like I think you're referring to in my recipe when I juiced it and then zested it, so then you're left with just the rind. And I've never tried just salting that and making preserved lemons that way, but I imagine you get something, and it might be a fun experiment to try at your house.
Okay, we'll try those lemons. All right, how do you know when canned food is expired?
I'm just going to jump in. We, of course, deal with a lot of this in food banking. Canned food is pretty impressive. You know, those folks knew what they were doing when they came up with the retort process. It is going to depend on what the product is. You've got things that are high protein, more alkaline, less alkaline. But as a rule of thumb, you can usually go to the USDA website and get some pretty good direction. A year is probably fine for most things. I at one point, you know, had to deal with a large donation of tuna fish that was in pouches, and I never really dealt with pouch tuna. I'm an old school guy, but the pouch tuna I called Chicken of the Sea or Sunkist, whoever it was, and they put 7 years on that stuff, past code date, and that's from the manufacturer. So if the packaging has its integrity, some of that packaging is pretty impressive. But I would go to USDA or one of those sites and see what you're actually talking about. It's more of a concern if the can is dented near the seam. You know, is the top bulbous? That's when you're starting to get microbiology going on inside and it's puffing out. There's a few things you can do. There was a large food bank in the Mid-South that they built a huge vacuum chamber. So they would put all their dented canned goods in there, draw a vacuum on it, and you would see a leak if there was a leak in the can. That was a pretty involved process to make sure they didn't waste food, but I'd go with USDA site myself, probably.
Okay, we're pretty much just about out of time, although we do have a lot more questions, which we will share with our panel and see if we can pull together some answers and post them. I want to let everyone know, we've had a lot of questions about this, that we will be posting all of the handouts, the videos, the video of the webinar. We have a number of handouts that we shared through the handout feature in GoToWebinar today, so folks can see those. And all the recipes that the chefs have all shared with us. So I just want to, again, acknowledge and thank all of our organizers for today's webinar, Jesse, Ann, Gary, Lynn, and the chefs that have spent a lot of effort putting together their videos. I know that some folks had some audio problems in the beginning. It was hard to hear, I think, particularly for some first two videos. I tried to make some adjustments, but I think it was really in the volume of the YouTube video that might have been a little soft. But in any case, I hope you enjoyed today. I hope you learned cooking techniques and everyone can go home and stop generating food waste and save some food scraps and eat them. So take care. Thanks, everyone. We'll be doing more on reducing food waste, so stay tuned and stay in touch with us. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Terry.